This is Let's Talk, getting to the root causes of the important issues of the day. This on-air community forum believes your voice matters and welcomes all thoughts and views without judgment. Please join today's conversation by calling 415-663-8492 or tweet us at Let's Talk on KWMR. And this is my comeback show, and Paul said, I want to cheer some cheerful, light, let's have some good vibes for your return, Charles. And what is the topic? I've forgotten. You mentioned it.
Suicide.
Oh,
boy.
Well, I think I've had people in my life who've committed suicide. Have we all had someone in our life?
Yes, we all have.
Yes.
Shelley?
Yes.
Attempted.
But you don't.
And I know people who, have.
Yeah.
I had two girlfriends in college that both said, I tried to kill myself.
Oh, dear. So you were the Ted Hughes of Ohio State, apparently?
Yeah.
Okay.
So since that is the topic, wait, where is it? There we are. Since that is the topic for today, let me just give out the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, National Lifeline number, 1-800-273-8255. And please, if you saw the blurb or the Facebook post about this show and you're calling in for advice, don't get advice from us. Call one of these numbers if you're having thoughts. And there's a crisis text line as well, 741-741. And then, of course, there's also local Marin County 415-499-1100. But so, yes, we are talking about suicide, and it was, of course, brought about by the reaction to the cook.
Anthony Bourdain.
But there were more than
and
that.
Kate Spade.
Kate Spade, that was quite a show.
And, so many others down the years. And so I thought it was interesting, some of the reactions to it, oh, he had a 13-year-old daughter. You shouldn't commit suicide if you have children and all that. And I think it gets easy to blame people who actually go through this and succeed being selfish, and even the ones who don't succeed. I guess that could be leveled at them. But of course, suicide, it's exactly what it is. It's a selfish act, an act on the person, on the self. So
it's against the law, isn't it?
It is illegal,
It is
isn't it?
illegal, yeah. Suicide is illegal. And maybe the only crime you can commit and get away with.
Not have to do the time.
That's
What are they going to do? Anyway?
Perfect crime.
So
See, you're so lighthearted about it.
this is a touchy subject, I'd say, because it deals with depression and anxiety and all that kind of thing.
Well,
but if you have comments, experiences to share, anything we would like to discuss about suicide today, call us at 415-663-8492 or 8317. Give us a call. When you call, you'll hear a little electronic noise as I put you in the system, but hang on until I say, caller, you're on the air. And turn down your radio. Give us a name. Doesn't have to be your own, just so we can call you something. And please keep the language clean. We are on the air. So,
well, I had a friend who was, I guess, probably about 60, 65, maybe 60, when he committed suicide, and had a family, two beautiful kids and beautiful wife and all that jazz. But, had suffered from some chronic illnesses, and but was also quite depressed, and drove his car to the edge of a bridge and jumped, right in without hesitation. Didn't sit on the edge and wait to be rescued. No, he wanted to go in and did, and died. And that was very sad. I liked him quite a bit, but I don't. I think that, as you say, it's easy to attribute. People say, "Oh, it's his wife. Oh, it was his job. Oh, it was the illness. Oh, it was this. Oh, it was that." I don't know.
It was the glyphosate. And I'm not joking about that.
Could be Roundup.
Well, here's why.
Oh,
okay. So the reason is because our gut biome is where we generate things like dopamine and serotonin. Our gut is also part of our mind, so to speak. It's
gut.
You talk about feeling with your gut and going with your gut.
Exactly.
Well, there's a reason. And so glyphosate basically dries up entirely all of the bacteria, the gut biome. So it throws people off balance, and it makes them open to chronic illness. It also makes them susceptible to have mental health issues. Often multiple things in tandem, all working at once. So
Poison food.
Poison food is attacking Americans in particular. And I have a friend whose son went to study film in Poland. And ever since he was like 7 years old, he's had a cough and asthma. And ever since he's been in Poland, it's all gone. So he's eating differently. And it, so behavior issues also, I mean, it's not, we don't realize that, we don't think about how what we eat can affect our mental health or our mental state. But if you think about, I know when my kids were little, you always hear about take a snack of cookies and milk. Everyone says cookies and milk. Well, cookies are full of sugar. The milk is actually full of sugar, and it's soft. What's that word? Soporific? Soporific. Thank you. It made me like be reading to my children and falling asleep mid-sentence.
Oh, hold on a
so
second.
So it's like drugged.
So that was Killjoy Shelley Rugg here on KWMR saying don't have cookies and milk. I just want to point out that your opinion.
Unless they're organic.
Oh, okay.
We have a caller. Caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Sally.
Yeah.
Serial caller.
Well,
cereal caller.
Sally the cereal caller.
Grain-free cereal caller.
Oh.
Wow.
So Shelley brought up a whole different set of points, and the initial point that I wanted to address, which was in response to what Charles said about his 60-something-year-old friend who chose to end his life, and did so seemingly without hesitation. And that is the key. That is one key to the whole weird conundrum of it, is that what I've learned, not really, well, in a way, kind of maybe secondhand, certainly not firsthand, in that I have tried to kill myself, because I haven't, but from observing and from hearing of friends who've lost people, is that if you're in this kind of angst from whatever the cause, and it's seemingly unending and you're drowning in it, that there's a calm that comes over when you kind of have the resolve to end it all and make a plan. So you make a plan to do it. Maybe not in every case, but in the couple cases I know of. You make a plan to do it, and you feel empowered by your plan and your resolve, and it really alleviates the pain, I think, maybe, and that's why there's no hesitation. So I know of a boy who was in my son's class, and he was only 16, and he was a very moody kid. I didn't know him personally. My son, of course, did know him. And he was, I don't know what you might just broad stroke say, problem child. And he resolved to ride his bicycle to the Golden Gate Bridge very early one morning and jump off the bridge, which he did. And apparently the day before, according to his mom, he was much alleviated in his spirits, and he spent time with her and had a really nice time with her, and the next morning he left.
Yeah, I've heard that before, yeah.
And then the other case that I know of, which I witnessed, I was in holiday traffic on the Golden Gate Bridge, and it was, I think, the 28th of December, in sort of crawling traffic going towards Marin County, and a young man came walking down, along there on the sidewalk on the bridge, and I feel like he must have waited for a break in the pedestrian traffic, because there was no one around him at this moment. Without hesitation, he climbed up on the railing and swan dove off. And my son-in-law was sitting next to me in the car, and happily my daughter was in the back, and she couldn't see because we were in this van, so she was like focused on texting someone, and she didn't see this because she's very sensitive. It would have haunted her forever.
Right.
And my son-in-law and I just looked at each other and, you know, sort of said, what the heck? So we called 911 right away and reported it, and I want to really say, no hesitation.
Yeah.
It was there, he didn't sit there and deliberate for a nanosecond.
Because he'd already done that for a long time, probably.
Right.
Well, that brings up an interesting point, which is that women attempt suicide more, but men are more successful because they are more violent when they
more guns.
More guns.
You can't leave the guns out of the issue.
Yes, I have a friend who did use a gun. A person who was a good friend of mine that I hadn't seen in a long time. I'd seen him once, and he was kind of a total mess. And he left a family. He had 2 children, 2 small children. And he was resolved. And
But that in itself is an illustration of the terrible pain that suicidal people are suffering from, and for whatever reason. I mean, it can be depression. Depression is a terrible, non-rational, dark pit, as I've had it described to me. There's a friend of a friend who's been depressed all his life, has clinical depression, and staves it off with antidepressants, but he's tried a couple of times, and he describes it as a black dog that's always chasing him, and it's...
Well, I don't know. I mean, I wonder, it can be faddish, right? I mean, it can be...
Right, because the numbers spike. After celebrity suicides,
clusters,
the numbers
say in Palo Alto, they have these high school clusters.
Sure, I remember
suicide.
You got when I was back in Michigan, where I grew up. One happened, and then there were like 2 that followed after it. Really young, 13-year-olds hanging themselves in the bathroom. It was really awful. But it was after there was
cluster,
one, there were.
Yeah.
That's a weird collective affirmation, crazy. It's a very strange phenomenon that is so tied into human nature.
Right, we see
very bizarre, and then you do get the collective. You get a mob mentality in different arenas, and so here you have a sort of a mentality of I want to do. I don't understand it, but yeah, and cults. Where you have cults where everyone sort of collectively
takes the Kool-Aid.
Although I think in Jonestown it was just they were threatened.
Yeah, they were forced.
You go this way or you go this way.
But it makes me think, gives me a link to mass shootings, like these school shootings.
Yes, that's exactly right.
That's copycat, and
sort of like
that's a kind of suicide because they know they're going to be killed either by themselves or by the police.
But it's a weird problem because what they would say is don't make such a big deal about it in the press and don't trumpet it. Don't talk about. I mean, it is kind of a weird catch-22. You're not going to talk about the 15 kids that were killed.
And then Columbine looms into that too. They wanted to outdo Columbine.
Oh, interesting.
That's right. These kids were studying Columbine.
Yeah.
There's a fascination, and young people are prone to having dark fascinations.
Well, that's a good point. I was just thinking of The Sorrows of Young Werther. You can help me with my German pronunciation there. Paul has been he has been dying for just some more obscure references. So that's a novel by Goethe from the 18th century. Thank you.
No R in there. Goethe.
Well, you see.
Bertie the dinosaur, was it?
Well, so the character is unhappy. Young Werther is there is an R and the 2 R's. Is a young man. He's unhappy in love, unrequited love, or disappointed, and he takes his life with a gun. As I recall, I've seen the Massenet opera. I actually haven't read the novel. So it caused in the late 1700s a huge wave of suicides.
Yeah,
young men killing themselves.
Right.
Oh dear.
As a romantic gesture.
Well, there used to be, for some people, especially the upper crusters, especially European upper crust, it was an honorable thing to do. It's like a captain going down with his ship, right? I mean, that's a form of suicide, but he's doing it from duty. Or I might be sometime. Who was that?
Captain Oates.
Captain Titus Oates.
Who is Captain Oates? Help our Americans.
Walking out onto the Antarctic, into the blizzard in Antarctica to save his fellow men of his food portion, all that sort of stuff.
Isn't that different? Self-sacrifice to help others or something?
Perhaps, although I think there's an element of that in certainly in depressive suicides, and sometimes in suicides that are maybe caused or precipitated by financial difficulties. It's to save the family from.
Speaking of financial,
destitution,
they found that if you live in a neighborhood where your neighbors have significantly more money than you do, that increases the likelihood of suicide.
Wow!
I know. There's so many things studies they've done that increase the likelihood, though. Yeah. If you're single, that increases your likelihood.
Loneliness is not sustainable. I just want to put that out there. Or was it living alone?
Living alone.
Living alone. Pardon me. Paraphrase.
Unemployed is a big factor in suicide.
I got a lot of warning signs over here.
Let me hold your hand, Charles.
We're having a hand.
He's got about
oh my gosh,
4
Charles!
of
Here's
things.
number 3. Your hands are so soft.
Oh, that's funny. It's related to how I'm unemployed. Okay, go
You're
on.
really likely unemployed, single.
Oh, no.
Who says I'm unemployed? I get paid to be me.
That's true. I'm sorry. You are employed.
And let me just reiterate, if anyone listening is actually thinking about suicide, may I suggest 1-800-273-8255, the Prevention Lifeline. Have a chat to someone who's a professional counselor.
Well, here's another question.
Perhaps help you with it.
Well, here's another question, though. I mean, isn't what they call suicidal ideation or thinking about killing yourself or having isn't that sort of normal too, though? I mean, I think a lot of people. Have you ever been? Not that you seriously are contemplating or planning a suicide, but just the thought, like, God, it would be great if this was all over, or I mean, I just people who never have suicidal thoughts, are they really normal? I don't know. What do you think? Do you ever?
I think people do think of all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And the idea with that is to realize that it's a thought, and it's a passing thought, and a mood, which is a passing mood, and that is that not to grasp it too tightly, and not to then turn around and condemn yourself for having those thoughts, whatever those thoughts are. And
I don't think that they're often. I mean, I've never seriously contemplated suicide, but I've certainly. Thought about it. I could never do it. I'm the flower of my generation, and what would the world be without me to give it hope? But
I guess that saves me from one of my compliments, Charles. You just complimented yourself.
I did. I had.
Well, no, I think you can think about it, and then because it's very instructive in a sense. If you're hopefully ultimately buoyant and do not latch onto it as a real palpable option, because if you consider it, then it can take you to another thought, which is
how to do it.
No. Well, I wouldn't even get to how. In fact, when I have thought about it, I go directly to, but I'll miss so much. I'll miss my kids.
Well, I'm slightly different. I'll be missed so much is what I think about.
Well,
slightly different.
So you are not a depressive person.
But I have been depressed. I've been very depressed. But the thing that comes through is that thought which sort of stops me. I'm lucky to go to that.
Right.
Interesting, though, talking about depression. There is a factor that if you've been treated for depression, that is a factor in suicide as well.
Medications.
Yeah, well...
Pharmaceuticals, I mean, I think we know from anyone who has seen TV, I don't see it very often, but the pharmaceutical ads very often suicidal ideation may cause suicidal thoughts.
Well, they're people who think that Prozac causes their child to commit suicide. They're people who really think that the depression medication has potentially very negative side effects. I don't know if they've ever studied. I don't know if that's
one of the things that really surprised me when I was just looking this stuff is one of the factors they consider is genetics. I think that's really.
Suicides run in families? Is that
it just says genetics. I really don't know.
I think that I have a relative who did commit suicide. That is very interesting, but there is also, having talked to a therapist about this, that when someone commits suicide, like a parent, then it really raises the odds of the child or one of the children doing the same. So it's a very dangerous thing, and we get very judgmental about it beyond the stats. We get personally judgmental, like, how could you be so selfish as to leave? I mean, I think of that, especially in the case of, most famously, just for example, Anthony Bourdain, who left a 13-year-old, or no, that was Kate Spade. They both had daughters. I think they both had kids, Bourdain and Kate Spade. But I just, you can just say that because it's so easy, because you're not in their skin.
Yeah, right. Exactly. There were a couple of posts on Facebook, and I think Stephen has one as well, but there's a woman actually describing what it's like for her to have this depression. It's just pain all the time. She says when you have depression, it's like it snows every day, and you're digging your way out the whole time, and it's painful, and your hands hurt, and people keep asking you why you're devoting your day to this, and they think you're just being flaky, and sometimes it's a full-blown blizzard. It's a wall of snow. The power flickers and goes out. It's too cold to sit in the living room anymore, so you get back into bed with all your clothes on, and you eat Pop-Tarts. And
what's so bad about that?
Well,
I mean, I wouldn't go for the Pop-Tarts, but
I'd go for a nice scone.
A scone.
Anyway, she describes it as that. It's just a constant, grueling, terrible, painful, never-ending task to stay alive. And another person who I hope might call in later, she actually reposted this. She says, with most medications I'm prescribed, I cannot stand the side effects. I either gain 20 pounds or I end up being stripped of feeling anything at all, or I have more intense suicidal ideation episodes. I simply want to jump off the Golden Gate or the St. John's Bridge because I can't stand living in my skin for another moment. Eek. Wow.
Yeah.
And anyone who feels that they can't stand living in their skin for another moment, that is
you feel trapped. How can I get out of this? Yeah.
And how can you think of anyone else at a time like that? I mean,
or anything else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what can anyone say to anybody who feels that way? Are there ways of comforting someone or trying to? I mean, suicide prevention hotlines, of course, that's what they do all day. And
but loneliness. I think loneliness is a big problem in this culture, and feeling of isolation. But Shelley, I was interrupting. What were you going to say?
Well, I also found a post on Facebook that I thought was really interesting, and she starts out. She says, "Trigger warning." If you struggle with suicidal thoughts or feelings, this story will likely be triggering, so you might not want to read it. So she says, I know this is hard to hear and understand, but I want to take some pressure off of all those who love people who are chronically depressed and suicidal. I was more or less suicidal for about 10 years. My depression was consuming and no one could help me. The people I loved tried to help, but my illness was a black hole that turned everything to darkness. I hid my depression from almost everyone and pretended everything was fine most of the time. When people knew about my pain and tried to help, I felt corrosively ashamed. When people did not try to help, I felt worthless. When people commiserated, I felt overwhelmed by their pain. When people tried to cheer me up, I felt invalidated and misunderstood. Being alone made me feel so lonely that I wanted to tear off my own skin. Being around others made me incredibly anxious and self-conscious. Feeling briefly happy made me feel terrified of the crushing disappointment of the misery returning. Feeling sad made me feel pathetic and self-involved. Faking happiness made me feel hollow. Being honest made me feel unbearably raw and desperate. There was no way to win. My depression could turn anything into weapons against myself and those close to me. I felt so guilty that I couldn't let anyone help me. I thought about dying all the time and tried to kill myself once. If I had died then, it wouldn't have been anyone's fault. No one could have saved me. Most people who tried to rescue me were sucked dry by the effort. My depression made them feel helpless and useless and miserable. We were all victims to the illness.
Does this get any better? Is there a happy ending here?
So she says, I'm trying to say reach out. Yes. Do what you can. Yes. But it's also okay that you have to protect your own well-being as well. It may not be possible to save someone. It's okay that you feel overwhelmed by their depression. It's reasonable that you run out of patience and resources. It's okay that you're a whole person with limitations just like they are. It's okay that we're all doing the best we can.
Wow.
Powerful stuff.
She can write well as well.
She's alive and well. She has recovered from her depression and her suicidal thoughts.
Wow. So, Sally, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for calling in.
Well, very important show. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, caller.
Line is open, 415-663-8492. This is Let's Talk Call-In Radio on KWMR 90.5 FM in Point Reyes Station, 89.9 Bolinas, 92.3 in the San Geronimo Valley. And programming on KWMR is underwritten by our listener members and by the Palace Market in downtown Point Reyes Station, offering produce, cheeses, wines, a full deli and meat department, and an assortment of natural health foods and supplements. We're also supported by the Point Reyes Light, an independent and locally owned newspaper telling West Marin stories since 1948, featuring award-winning reporting, essay opinions, a community events calendar, and the sheriff's calls. Office and newsroom open Monday through Thursday in downtown Inverness. Subscription, classifieds, calendar, and advertising information plus letter to the editor forms are available at ptreyslight.com. That's PTREYES light.com or at 415-669-1200. And we're also supported by Shelter Publications, publishing books in West Marin for 46 years. Publications include Lloyd Kahn's Shelter, Builders of the Pacific Coast, and Tiny Homes, as well as Bob Anderson's Stretching. More information about Shelter Publications available at their website, shelterpub.com, and their blog, theshelterblog.com. That's THE, shelterblog.com. Thank you to all our underwriters. This is Let's Talk, and
we have a caller.
Stephen Hurwitz. Oh, we do?
I snuck over there.
Put her in. Yeah. Hello, caller. You're on the air. What's your name, please?
This is Amanda.
Oh, Amanda.
Hello. Hey, I really want to congratulate you guys on the most recent shows you've done because they've been really wonderful, and I want to thank you for doing some great programming on KWMR.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Amanda.
You're very welcome, Shelley. And I wanted to...
Yeah, the two shows I wasn't on, Amanda, I noticed that.
There is a correlation.
Okay, stop.
We're really good. Yeah. But seriously, this topic is very timely and important, and I consider myself fortunate that I haven't seriously considered taking my own life, and I understand how difficult things can be for folks. But I was thinking of something while I was listening to the program about when I worked in transportation, how there was this article in the San Jose Mercury News when they used to do a weekend magazine before they canceled that, like so many newspapers have, about the Caltrain, because that was a big situation out on the peninsula where a lot of people jumped in front of trains when it was very unfortunate. But also how difficult it was for the people driving the trains and what it did to them.
Terrible.
But also there was one that just sticks with me, and there was a woman who was a copycat. Suicide is extremely contagious. And she had gone out, but what she didn't know was the train that she was jumping in front of was going through this construction zone and was going much slower than it normally would.
Oh.
So she just got kind of bumped around and tumbled, and she lived. And I think I've heard this from other situations, too. When somebody survives an attempt that they thought was their only option, how grateful they are that we're not successful.
That's right.
Huh.
And I think that is something that's important to get out there because, you get wrapped up and who knows exactly how the human mind works. If you've read The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, there's a whole section in there on a sort of like this rampantly just contagious suicide situation on this island. And I think that it's also important to point out that those who were unsuccessful are often just so very grateful to be alive and then can really appreciate the fact that they, may not have had the ability or the courage to reach out, but that there are so many people that do care.
Mm. Yeah.
So that's my 13 cents.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's inflation for you.
Carry on.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks for calling.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So 415-663-8492. I want to remind you, panoramic highways closed in both directions at Ridge Road until further notice due to power lines down. Traffic is being diverted at Panoramic Highway and Shoreline. There you go.
Well, I think also make friends with people. And my friend in San Francisco gave me great advice. Says you want to make a friend, ask them for a favor, or offer to do them a favor. Get involved in other people's lives, and because I think a lot of people are really quite lonely and that don't know how to sort of reach out or get involved, and
certainly
afraid
a contributing factor if you're already predisposed to. Boy, I'm not seeing that light today. I don't know what it is.
That's not a comment on depression, by the way.
And
He's not seeing the light
part of the impetus for this show was that there are new studies showing the increase in suicide rates in the U.S. 30% in half of the states, 30% in the past 17 years. Wow.
Along with a lot of chronic illness caused by glyphosate.
Well,
I'm harping, I know.
I'm with you on that.
So, caller, you're on the air. What's your name, please?
Hi, Paul. Tim K.
Hey, MK.
It's a family affair.
As the wise man once said, who in their right mind hasn't considered
Well, exactly.
suicide?
Yeah, I mean, people who haven't are strange.
Wonderful person. One thing that I was thinking about was that as maybe an older person, when I go to the doctor, you get to fill out these little questionnaires, and it's like, do you have high blood pressure? Do you have fallen arches, whatever? And then the thing comes along and says, do you have suicidal thoughts? Like, what? Just out of the blue. And I wonder if anybody tells the truth. Those things are so matter of fact and so cold that if you are indeed considering something or feeling hopeless or whatever, what?
Yeah, bluntness.
You're going to say no. It's like, do you use recreational drugs? No.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bluntness, it doesn't feel comforting, warming, concerning.
No, it's very matter of fact and very.
Yeah.
Well, and also, does it affect your?
They're going to immediately either sell you a drug, or send you to a counselor who's 50 years younger than you are.
What, does it affect your insurance? I mean, we're always those considerations. Now, all the information about yourself is sort of a part of this world of data that can change. Like I said, the cost of insuring
the drug of choice has a big effect in it. When they study what was in people's bodies, the number one was alcohol.
Really?
It's a depressant, sure.
Yeah, and the second
you
of all,
mix it with barbiturates, really good, effective way, I guess.
Opioids came in third, actually. Alcohol is number one, and anti-anxiety medications was the number two.
Interesting.
As a suicide drug?
No.
As being in their body.
Yeah.
Oh, just being
after they committed suicide. Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, alcohol is a depressant, so.
Yeah. I don't find it so.
No, we had a great time last night. I mean, good Lord.
Oh, dear.
Yeah, depends on who you're with.
Well, that's true. Yeah, if it's just you and a bottle.
I think I agree with my child saying that these shows are so valuable, and
Oh,
I thank you. And
thank you, MK.
I hope you are reaching the more desperate among us.
The listeners are the valuable ones, not us, actually. The callers are even more valuable. So
What's that, Charles?
I'm sorry, MK, you said something?
He was just coughing.
Yes. Thank you, MK.
I love that. He said, did you say something?
Well, thank you, MK. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome.
Bye. Bye now.
Here.
When I was about 14 or 15 years old, I came home from a weekend away to an empty house, and my neighbor came and said, "Your mom's in the hospital. She overdosed on pills." And at that point, my brothers had been spending the weekend with my dad. My parents were divorced. I called my dad and I said, "Can you hang on to the boys for a while?" And my desire to help my mom just took over. And I somehow felt responsible, or somehow that I actually could help her. And that's really kind of something I've, into my adult life, had to kind of struggle with, this feeling of needing to rescue, save, help, lift up, whatever.
But is it a kind of feeling about powerlessness and suicide? I mean, that's something that people who feel they don't have any control over their life, or that they can't, get the things they want in life, that's an act of control, to commit suicide. That you're going to control how you feel and how other people feel about you.
There has been, some suggestion that people who attempt suicide, like especially overdosing, because you can get to the hospital in time and get your stomach pumped and probably survive, that it could be considered a cry for help more than anything. So, need for attention. And again, back to your idea about loneliness,
Or lack of meaning in life.
Or lack. Yeah, I think my mom, she really felt misunderstood probably, and suffered from bipolar.
Yeah.
Didn't know it.
There you go.
So.
Yeah, it's, obviously it's not just a mental health issue, but certainly mental health is a huge cause of it.
Well, 40,000 people a year, I think. So
on average, one person dies by suicide every 16 minutes. And, interestingly, a suicide note is left behind in only a minority of cases, 10 to 35%.
Huh.
That's not the romantic sort of, the romantic era poet.
Yeah.
Taking an overdose of laudanum and leaving a wonderful sonnet.
How much of it is impulse? That's the thing about access to guns. If they weren't around,
guns, yeah.
Then
sure.
It might be less. It's like, I feel like killing myself.
Well,
and there's a gun.
Well, that's an interesting thing about coal gas, right? This is not Malcolm Gladwell, but his comrade in arms, the Freakonomics people, Levitt and Dubner, said when coal gas was in stoves, remember Sylvia Plath, head in the stove deal, it will kill you. It will suffocate you pretty quickly. But when they went away from coal gas, it doesn't.
Natural gas doesn't work.
Yeah, you can stick your head methane. You can stick your head in that oven all day long. Probably not that, but there was a big drop in suicides because that method of committing suicide, which is relatively painless, was gone.
Yeah, and it was in every house. So if you were feeling particularly bad one day, yeah, right. More than 50% of completed suicides are by firearm.
Yeah, my dad. At the end of his life, he couldn't remember anything, but he could recognize that something was off kilter, that he wasn't productive anymore. And he talked about wanting to kill himself every day. Every day. And we would sort of try to joke with him, "So how are you planning on doing that, Dad?"
Dear.
Luckily, there was no gun in the house because that's the first thing he thought of, to get a gun, but he didn't have access to one. So
they would now. Each day, an average of 20 American veterans die by suicide. Compared with non-military civilians, veterans are at a 21% higher risk. female veterans are at special risk. I'm not sure what that means, but yeah. And, of course, mostly by gun, because that's what they know. Hi, caller, you are on the air. What's your name, please?
Hello, this is Mia calling.
Hello, Mia.
Hello. I just had something that I thought of. I feel like if people are successful, it's so easy to say, they were such an awesome person, like, all these things. It's sort of an easy reaction, say, oh, we miss them and everything. But I think for survivors, there may be an awkwardness that people feel, like not knowing how to handle it. So I'm just imagining, I don't really know this for sure, but I feel like there may be an increased isolation because people are nervous about how to reach out to them or how to approach it because they know that somebody attempted suicide. So I just wanted to acknowledge that may be another factor out there in terms of after the fact, people not knowing how to handle it,
So you're talking about
for survivors, like they may not.
You mean their family or people who
just
attempt
people
it?
That they know. I mean, I don't know. I've known a couple people, and you kind of that there was an attempt or some thought of it, and it's just hard to know whether do you say something about it? Do you just reach out to them? Is it patronizing to reach out to them? Do they just want to ignore the fact that it happened? I think there is a discomfort with how to handle it with the person,
the survivor.
It's stigmatizing,
or even just somebody who had considered it. I just imagine that's another factor that people might face after they survive, which is unfortunate because if they had succeeded, you would say oh, this person was amazing, and and you still feel that way, and that they're alive, but there is sort of an awkwardness that I wish there was, but
a stigma.
If anyone has any advice about that?
Well, actually, I'm looking at there was an article, CNN actually online, written in just this week, this Monday, words to say and not to say about suicide.
Yeah,
and it's
exactly.
it's a really it's a really good article. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I just how to support somebody and acknowledge the elephant in the room or not acknowledge the elephant in the room or just move on. Things like that. So.
Yeah, they say don't treat it like a taboo topic. That if you think a friend or family member is considering it seriously, then you bring it up. You say, are you going to try and commit suicide?
And it seems like the awkwardness of reaching out.
I just did what we're not supposed to do is say commit suicide because then it's like a sin, committing suicide.
So, nobody who's been reading their Baltimore Catechism. Nobody.
Thanks for
Thank you, Mia.
tackling the topic.
Thank you.
Thanks for calling.
Thank you, Mia.
And we have another caller. Hi, caller. You're on the air. What's your name, please?
Hi, this is Gail.
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 How are we this morning?
Very good, thank you. Great show. Thank
Thanks.
you. So this is statistic. I actually just checked on it because I had heard it before, but especially for people who are left after a suicide, and of course the natural process of just thinking, what did we miss? What could we have done? How could we have not known? It says anywhere from a third to 80% of all suicide attempts are impulsive acts. According to the New England Journal of Medicine, 24% of those who made near-lethal suicide attempts decided to kill themselves less than 5 minutes before the attempt. 70% made the decision within an hour.
Yikes.
That's where the guns come in.
Yeah. Or gas stoves, the old gas stoves.
Or bridges.
I mean,
Bridges, yeah.
That's right. They did a study of 515 people who were prevented on the Golden Gate Bridge. After 26 years, 94% were still alive and died of natural causes. Most rare survivors recall regretting their impulsive decisions instantly, even as they were falling.
Wow.
Well, yeah, I can say it.
One who said changed his mind the moment after he left. I instantly realized that everything in my life that I thought was unfixable was totally fixable, except for having just jumped.
Yeah, yes. Well, I think economics is going to come into this at some point too, Gail, because I had a friend who was very suicidal because he was broke and old, and it's not fun to be broke at any age. It's especially not to be fun broke when you're a senior, and he got a little money. And it all turned around. And he wasn't talking about suicide all the time anymore. But I think that if he hadn't gotten that little bit of money, which wasn't much, he probably would have at some point gone through with it. So, anyway, sorry to interrupt you.
You know, it's a full spectrum, and it's not to diminish the people who are suffering or who are planning, you know, intentionally, who have concluded that it's not worth living, or that they're a burden to others, or that no one cares, or whatever. You know, that whole range of reasons are, but it's also, you know, in medicine they call this a permanent solution to a temporary problem. You know, and this impulsiveness, like I said, for people who are left, you know, I think that it may be some comfort to recognize, you know, that it may not have been something they could have prevented or have recognized or should have known about.
Yes, you know,
impulsiveness is a real feature too.
There was that year when there were 3 suicides in Marshall. Remember that? It wasn't so long ago.
Oh, I remember 2 of them. Who was the third?
There was a fence builder. I've forgotten his name.
Oh, the fence builder.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I missed it.
Charlie Parker and David Beatty.
Paul Duffy up in Tamales just
Duffy.
3 or 4 years ago.
You know, everyone. At the wake we had for Charlie, it's like,
well,
wow,
you know, that points out
what
something.
could we have done?
I think it was a breakup.
He got out of a window in the middle of the night, so nobody heard him leave the house, and you know, and he went off and shot himself.
Well, you know that.
I think it was his girlfriend.
Well, he was feeling bad because his partner
away
from a long time.
When someone commits suicide, when someone it affects the whole family. This isn't just an individual act. I guess when they say selfish, it means the husband, the wife, the children, the neighbor. I mean, everyone is affected by that in a way that's so different from somebody passing.
And how to deal with it personally, and how to help someone who's trying to deal with that, was, as Mia was saying. And
Gail, you've gone through that recently, haven't you?
Oh, on the spot there, Gail.
Gail?
I didn't hear. No.
Oh.
Not sure.
Well, okay.
I knew a family. It was a husband and a wife. They had a small child, and they had one on the way. And I worked with the wife, and the husband would periodically come by and visit. And I would describe him as just radiant, joyful, playful, always had something to offer and bring to the situation. Just a shining light. And the reality was that he was clinically depressed, that in his home life and work life, he had trouble getting out of bed to go to work. And he started to develop quite a bit of shame about how his depression was impacting his beautiful family, and how he wasn't being a good provider, and that his wife had to take care of the children, you know, the child and him, and support the family. And he very, very deliberately planned his death, such that it happened at a family gathering where there were other people, and he hung himself in a bathroom because he knew that his wife wouldn't find him, but that he would be found. And she immediately had people around her to support her. So, you know, his suicide was about feeling that he was a burden, and that he really made a decision that his wife and his children would be better off. They'd have a better life and a better future without him in it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Eek.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to sign off. You guys are doing a great job.
Thank you
for calling in.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you.
Let's just remind everybody, Panoramic Highway is closed in both directions at Ridge Road until further notice due to power lines down. Traffic is being diverted at Panoramic Highway and Shoreline. Physicians are more than 2 times as likely to die by suicide as non-physicians.
Very high.
Dentists have a very high rate of suicide.
Well, why not?
Yeah. Sorry to the dentists out there.
Sorry.
It's a long-standing English resentment of the dental profession.
Oh.
Anyway, I don't know. I do think people despair. They don't have a lot of meaning in their life. I mean, even if you have work, for example, maybe the work isn't you feel of any great significance. And I think more and more people like that. Although people are able to express it virtually now. I had a acquaintance that committed a crime, not a very nice crime. Don't worry, he's in state prison in West Virginia right now. He was in his mid to late 30s, a busboy at a restaurant, living in a horrible apartment somewhere, but no sort of romantic life or really. He had this virtual world of like online video games in which he was a hero or an adventurer or this or that. And I thought that was really telling. And he fell in love with a 12-year-old over the video game and then went down to West Virginia to meet her, which is why he's in jail. But I was thinking about that, how little meaning people have in their lives. But that was a world in which he could do daring things and take risks and be the hero.
It was a comfort to him in some way.
Well,
or it took him out of his own life.
I think so, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, it led him to a pretty bad situation.
Well.
But I was curious that, again, people not having much meaning in their life. It's easy not to have meaning in life if you're rich because the food is amazing and the travel and the wine is fantastic. But much more difficult if you're poor.
So don't treat suicide like a taboo topic. Be upfront. How to help someone? Be direct and ask, "Are you thinking about suicide?" When you're able to say the S word, you acknowledge it, it takes some of the power away. And then ask, what can you do? How can you help? They may not have an answer, but it's worth asking. It's okay to get even more specific with questions. Do you have a plan or a method? Do you have a time frame?
Charles, the food was amazing. Anthony Bourdain, the food was amazing.
Oh, but that's the other side. I have a perfect response to you. No, but I have, because I keep warning people that actually adventure travel and food does not provide meaning in your life. I've been warning my neighbors about this for years, and, maybe now they'll listen.
And don't cast blame and or search for details. Yes, because those who have lost a loved one to suicide may be reluctant to share their stories because doing so is usually met with gross insensitivity, as in, why didn't you do something? Or didn't you know he was mentally ill?
Did anybody actually say that? Maybe they do.
I think, I think certainly people think it, right?
Right.
And I've no doubt they say that to surviving family and friends. That sort of reaction, casting blame, however unintentionally, on survivors who are already struggling with guilt is just one way the stigma of suicide gets perpetuated. Yeah. So we all want to know reasons why, and sometimes there isn't actually a reason except chemicals. And
it's making me think about social media again because, we all have a tendency to want to put on our best face with people we meet. And there's the classic, how are you? And the classic answer is, I'm fine. And everyone knows the script. So it's easy to put on a good face and get through, go to the market and come home. And all you have to do is say, I'm fine. How are you? And you can do that. And you can hide it from people, And so then, social media comes along and now there can be this impression that everyone's living these perfect lives. Sure. I knew a couple, I'd see their posts, and it was like the classic perfect family posts, the mother and the father and the two kids, a boy and a girl, and the dog, and, they were always doing awesome family outings, and then I talked to my friend, and I said, wow, you guys are living this, beautiful life. And she says, maybe not.
Well, I've tried the alternative. I often encounter the question, how are you doing, with the line from Buchner's Wojciech, which is, all human beings are an abyss, you get dizzy staring down. And it doesn't work.
That's how you answer?
Yeah, oftentimes.
I'll have to remember to ask you how you are.
It gets him some strange looks in the Western.
There you go. Or any place. I get strange looks all over. What can I say?
Well, you've really cleaned yourself up. So.
Oh, why, thank you so much. My day in court today. Anyway.
Well, there are some people who practice actually answering the question.
Oh. Well, no, it's really
and people
difficult.
aren't prepared for that.
No.
You're totally
How
freaking
long
out.
are we going to be standing here? I was on my way somewhere.
I'm just here for oranges.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't want to. Well, it's just a thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate.
It's a social nicety.
Yeah.
How about, do you want the short answer or the long answer?
Like I say, offer to do somebody a favor, ask them to do you a favor, invite somebody over for dinner. Conviviality. Just get to know people. And if they're not interesting, you don't have to invite them back. It's very easy.
True. And again, let me stress this: if you are thinking of doing yourself in, let's just call it that, 1-800-273-8255 is the lifeline number, or you can text HOME to 741-741. I don't know what that means, but that is available too. And that's the national hotline. People are standing by 24/7 to talk and listen, so please give it a chance. This has been Let's Talk. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Shelley. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
And KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members. Thank you to all our callers and all our listeners out there. We know you're out there. And I'm going to leave you with a piece of music by Logic, and the title is 1-800-273-8255. And after he played this at the Video Music Awards, there was a huge spike in calls to the hotline, so maybe it was a good thing. Thank you, everybody.